delay in starting. We're gonna see if we can contact some more members. I know there are many committee meetings that are going on, but if y'all will again bear with us and be patient, see if we can wait a little bit longer, see if we can get a few more members here. Thank you. we're going to go ahead and start. Hopefully a few more members will come in. I know there's a whole lot of activity around the Capitol today with meetings and other visitors. Don't worry. We've got it. Don't we, Chairman Burkle? We've even gotten help from Representative Mathiak. We can do it today. All right, we're going to start. Again, thank you for being here today. The agenda, we're going to start the hearings today with the Technical College System of Georgia. Our new commissioner, Greg Dozier. I know he's been around for a while. Welcome to your new role, and quite frankly, excited to have you, and look forward to hearing from you. I know as a commissioner, you and I spoke briefly. I know, as you come in and look at the system and evaluate it, you may have a few ideas and may want to share with us those ideas, and then we'll get into the budget numbers.
And members, thank you for the opportunity today. And, first and foremost, really appreciated our conversation in your office and enjoyed our talk in the hallway the other day. And I think it's just a blessing for me to be part of this TCSG team. I think it's very evident as I speak to the members in the hallways as well as the communities, the importance of our colleges in our communities to our industry partners, but our community as a whole, and how it makes a difference, and the role we play in economic development and workforce development. And you're right, as I come in and am getting my feet under me and getting the team and I aligned in vision, a few things that I hope to bring to the table is really a little more innovativeness, and that's not a knock to our colleges. They are extremely innovative, so please don't mishear me. Very impressed with my 22 college presidents and their ability to work with the communities and see the needs and make sure we're providing that workforce that's needed. What I've asked our system office team to do is be looking, year, 2 year, 5 years down the road. What's coming, and how do we make sure that we're not just providing those jobs that are needed currently, but those jobs that are needed to actually continue to be the number one place to do business. Make sure that we have that workforce that's being prepared and we're seeing it and being that innovator. One of the areas that you and I discussed in there that I hope that we'll have some announcements on in the near future, and I still don't have a date yet to provide you today, but we're very excited about the opportunity of something called a Cloud Computing Academy. And so as we move into those type of directions, there's just an air of excitement. We know that that's going to really be a difference maker in our community. Additionally, before we jump in, and I covered this in the joint, but just as a reminder to myself, really, and to you guys, just the breadth of the touch of the colleges amazes me. 356,000 people being touched. When you cut across everything that's provided through our technical college system, 140,000 serviced in our technical education program, 47,000 serviced in our adult education, 120,000 in our economic development side of things, 25,000 in Quick Start, and 21,000 in workforce development. So just very proud of the breadth and the touch points that our schools have. And also very proud of that placement number. We've had that placement number for a number of years. I obviously can't take credit of it, but it shows that we're really in tune when we have an 88.6 placement in the field that you're trained in, and then a 99.1% placement in continuing your education or in that field. So very proud of those two things. Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, I'll jump into the budget. If not, I'll be happy to expound even more on that, but I'll take my direction from you, sir.
I think that's good, and what I wouldn't mind doing, Commissioner, is maybe, in a follow-up hearing as we start to get into the budget, and let you get a little bit more of time up under your belt and some of the things you do. Maybe bring you back and talk a little bit more about some of the ideas that you have, and look forward to a little more detailed discussion there.
Absolutely, and I would look forward to that and would appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So if you'll start with the budget, let me get a few things in order here.
Okay.
you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned Quick Start, which is, I think, a fantastic program, has shown to be advantageous to us in the state for our industries coming in workforce development and training. You mentioned 25,000 in the Quick Start program. How is that like an annual figure? So because you've got classes, you got training that goes on. Is that
the Quick Start program? As I educate myself, so I apologize if I'm mentioning something that you already know. But the Quick Start program is dedicated to those new companies that are coming into Georgia, or companies that are expanding that have a certain level of jobs. And I apologize, I can't remember that magic number, but it fluctuates every year on how many we're actually training. The 25,000 represents those companies that qualified for the Quick Start incentive, and the employees in those companies that got specialized training through the Quick Start program. And that ebbs and flows depending on the number of companies that are coming in and qualify.
At one point we had talked, at one point we had talked about regarding the Quick Start. It was a pretty heavy threshold to get beyond at one point, and I think it was somewhat malleable, that number in a small community, which,
Yes,
the other day we had a 200 job announcement in Tiff County, which is like, this is, they'll mark their calendars from henceforth, based on that announcement. And for, some of these other chairmen, that's just a Tuesday. That's something that goes on routinely. But the threshold was a pretty large one for some small communities. And I'm hoping that I remember correctly that is somewhat malleable and given certain circumstances.
I think it is, and I'm going to educate myself more on that. I actually have a meeting with Pat over at Economic Development this Friday, and my understanding is most of our Quick Start partnerships are first started through the Department of Economic Development, identified, and then brought to us. So as I learn how that partnership is formed and what levels actually form that partnership, I'll be able to articulate a little bit better. But obviously this morning I still have a little bit more to go to understand on that area.
Thank you.
But I do think you're right. It is malleable based on that community and its needs and what that size project looks like.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Commissioner, floor's yours as far as the budget.
Okay. I have both budgets and are prepared to present both budgets. Is that the chairman's expectations today?
That is fine.
Okay. And I am working off of your tracking sheet. My page is 82. I'm not sure if the page is the same, but I start with section 46, and the first budget is adult education, and that's 46.1. When we're looking at our adult education area, that's obviously the area of LRR, ABE, GED prep. That's what this unit prepares our citizens for, those that do not have a high school diploma. The first item on there is a change to premiums related to DOAS, and I will cover that in its totality. It's a self-insurance program, and in this one section it's $1,094. But as you look at each program and add it up, it's a total of $96,230. And so each one of the programs will have that as its first item in there. As you go into the actual changes to the adult ed program itself, the first item is to reduce the funds for operating expenses allocations to colleges. And it's an amount of $676,350. That is the 4% amount for that program. What that represents is we have about 470 sites that provide adult education. So if you just look at the math, that comes out to be $5,000 to $10,000 per site. When you look at this year's budget, and as we go into the 2021 budget, it'll be $1,014,000 for that 6% cut. So I'll talk about it a little bit in a minute, but while we're talking about it, it's the same item spread across this year and next year. We believe we had an announcement about a month ago, or about two weeks ago, and it was related to other methods of getting your high school equivalency. Today we do one test, and it's called the GED. Most of us are familiar with that. We had about 10,000 graduates last year. Of that, about 3,000 were out of the prison system where I worked at previously in this. So great partnership there. we believe we're going to enhance, even in the midst of this cut, the number of folks that are getting a high school equivalency. We're introducing something called a Career Plus. And what a Career Plus does is it uses that education that you had done in high school. It does any portion of the GED test and the HiSET test that I'll talk about in just a minute. And then you add on any type of technical certifications you've gotten, similar to how we do the CTAE in the high schools. So if you get 2 technical certificates, have passed certain parts of your high school education and certain portions of either the HiSET or the GED, that will qualify you for a high school equivalency. And we believe that this is a pathway that will actually be very, very fruitful. In addition to that, I should have started with this one first, but there is a comparative test to the GED called HiSET. Many of our surrounding states are offering both the GED testing and the HiSET testing. And so we will be offering both of those as alternatives to get your high school equivalency. So by introducing these 2 additional avenues, even though we are having this cut, and we do believe that will impact the number of instructors that are out there, and that's what this will impact, is your part-time instructors providing services. We believe that we'll still be able to actually provide the service across the state.
And Commissioner, back to instructors. I mean,
yes, sir.
Obviously, not an insignificant amount.
Yes, sir.
But what do you see there, as particularly with these instructors? Is it a number of instructors, or is it less time? What are we seeing?
We believe that today there's going to be certain situations where we may send an instructor out to teach a local class of a small number of students today that we'll have to ask that we have a bigger number coming into that class. So we'll be restricting the number of people who are going out and teaching a one-off class to meet this budget cut. So that's the main area of how it's going to be impacting. We believe that we're going to be able to offer a higher level of opportunities through those other opportunities I met, but there will be a real impact as far as instructors' time out in small 2 or 3 type class scenarios.
Okay.
The next item, that's 46.1.3, and that is to reduce some one-time money related to the Cedartown Career Center. Basically, that facility was a new one to us, and we had a 3-month delay opening on it. So the total cost that was appropriated last year was $125,000, and so this is simply just 3 months of that cost being pulled back, and you will not see that in the big budget.
Okay.
The next division, and just so you know, that's about a 4.18% cut to that program. So it fits right in line with the 4% requirements. Departmental Admin, when we look at it, we have several items. The first item is DOAS that I've already talked about, but several items related to personal services. And that's 46.22, 46.23. We skip 0.4, which is travel. 46.25 and 46.26 are all items related to personal services and department admin. Those 4 items add up to $797,547. I'm sorry. I'll talk about each of them independently. When you look at the first one, 46.22, this is one position funded by Departmental Admin in the Governor's Office of Workforce Development Program utilizing existing federal funds. You'll see this item down in Workforce Development as a yes. And what this is, we had a deputy commissioner that oversaw Tech Ed, and we had a division director over Workforce Development. The position over Workforce Development was 100% funded by the WIOA funds. The Tech Ed deputy commissioner was funded 100% by state funds. We're consolidating those positions into one, which qualifies, we'll have one less person, but that individual qualifies for half of the money to be paid by state and half of the money to be paid by WIOA grants. So it saves on both ends. And so that's an efficiency that we're creating inside Department Admin. And that's why you see the transfer from a yes from Workforce Development into Admin in a cut of $103,649.
So, and Commissioner, forgive me, tell me a little bit about, you had the 2 positions.
Yes, sir.
Consolidating in one, but tell me a little bit about the functions for, if you
Sure.
If you could.
Yes, sir.
In other words, we're starting to see this, and I want to make sure as we go through these budgets that we're not.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, we're going to have to do more with less.
Right.
We get that. But we also want to make sure that the job we're doing is adequate and that the resources are there to complete the mission and the
Absolutely.
job. So, and just briefly, I mean.
Yep. So workforce development is a unit under the Division of Technical Education in the agency. And so several months ago, prior to my coming, the Deputy Commissioner over Technical Education, which oversaw basically curriculum, Perkins, all the functioning sides of technical education for our colleges, our 22 colleges, also oversaw workforce development. That individual took a presidency job in one of our colleges. Right. As that individual left department headquarters, system office is the right term, and that's why you see me struggling up here. I have a hard time saying system office, but I'm getting there. I want to say headquarters. When that person left system office, the individual who was over workforce development was who was selected to replace that individual as the head of all of that. About 50% of that person's time that's over that unit is spent in workforce development. And the individual who took it over is an expert in both areas. He's a former VP in one of our colleges, so he knows the technical education side very well. And he's been doing workforce development since we took it over. Okay. So while we obviously believe that it'll be an additional burden on that individual, we also think he has that expertise to handle that burden. Okay. The next item in here is 46.2.3. Is personal services related to $517,748. This was a reduction that was not in our original request, and what we believe it will impact is about 3 to 5 positions in our administrative operation. We've been blessed so far, or cursed, either way you look at it, but we've had 3 positions in just the last few weeks that have resigned, so that gives us the flexibility that we're already making headway toward meeting this $500,000 cut, but it's not one that we've identified specific positions to that I can articulate today to the committee. We're just looking to see how we can continue to function and operate with that cut. We believe we can do it, though. The next item is just a small reduction, $22,476 for travel. The next item is to transfer 1 position from Department Admin to Technical Education Program. That's $122,129. You'll see when we get down to Technical Education, that same position is to use other funds to fund it. So it's a cut of state funds, a moving from system office to technical education, and covered with other revenues. This position specifically is a position that was brought in a number of years ago to help with the film industry preparation as far as that curriculum goes. We believe that we'll continue to offer that in the tech colleges. They'll just be doing it at the tech school using the funds they raise from economic development to cover it. The final item in here is to reduce funds related to 1 vacant position, 54021. This is a position that was not initially in our recommendation, but it was a vacant admin assistant position that's at headquarters, and we're just continuing to hold that admin position and feel like that we will operate without it. The total reduction in departmental admin is approximately 9.49%, just to give you an idea of what that reduction is, which obviously I think protects what our core mission is, which is the colleges. The next program area is economic development and customized services. We were afforded some money for economic development several years ago. The envision there was to hire 4, we have consultants in here, but they're really going to be consultants for the industry. They're employees for the department. Mm-hmm. So to hire 4 consultants for the industry in welding and industrial maintenance, the vision there was when we had a company that needed some specialized training in the economic development side of things in a community. A lot of times we have not been as nimble as we needed to really be able to pick up and go offer that training very quickly. We had to pause, meet with the industry, come up with it, find an instructor that met that skill set, and then send it out. The idea was we would have 2 welding and 2 industrial maintenance experts that could go to those communities all over the state and serve that function for providing specialized training very quickly and more nimble. With the reduction of the $280,000, we plan on still doing that. We'll just have to do it from a college standpoint versus a system headquarters standpoint. And so we still have some work to do to get that plan completely vetted out. Obviously, each college has their own economic development division, so it's not a far stretch to see that we can be more unified in that effort across our colleges.
And Commissioner, I know you and I spoke in our meeting, in regards to, one night at a reception, I got swarmed by a lot of folks, the skilled trades folks from, welding and plumbing, electrical, and again, they're clamoring for, for qualified folks to come into the industry. They cannot hire enough people. So, again, I think as we start to look at focus, these are some of the areas that I'm concerned about because there's definite need across the state, as you and I spoke of.
Yes, sir.
To really help get some folks into these trade areas, these skills, because there are a lot of jobs out there waiting on these
That's
folks.
right.
If we can get them to come through.
So since our discussion, a couple of things that we've talked about internally around that is I mentioned earlier, we have a technical education side and an economic development side at each college. And one of the things that we probably could do a little better for those industries is when we find those needs like you're talking about that are in dire straits, how quickly can we jump on the economic development side that may not be a certificated program, but get the skill to where lay that bead. That's what I keep hearing. We just want somebody can lay that bead. We can be more nimble, get someone out there can lay that bead, but we can also continue to get those certifications that seem to be critical in this arena. Additionally, on top of that, one of the things we're looking at internally is there a way to shorten up the curriculum on those certifications to get them to the job market quicker? And that's something you have to be careful with, but something we are taking serious. Some of those still require some basic English and math. Some of them don't, and we need to see how consistent we are on that process and make sure we're providing the right training for the right industry. But your point was well taken in your office, and I've actually heard that just continuously from many others. So it's on my radar. Yes, sir. Just following along, that economic development represented an 8.25% reduction for that operating unit. Workforce development is simply the position I mentioned earlier as far as the half funding for the deputy commissioner role. And then Quick Start is a reduction of 4%, and the program cut is 4% of $453,956. That is in the area of that consultant training. We do plan on obviously servicing any industry that the Department of Economic Development identifies as needing this service. This is just how nimble we are and how quickly we provide it, and we will do our best to continue to meet all our needs there. The last unit is the same position I mentioned earlier, where we were moving the position that did the film training and curriculum, and we're moving that to technical ed and using other funds. Mr. Chairman, that's the supplemental budget, and I'll pause for a second before I roll into the big budget, but happy to roll right into it as well.
Any questions regarding amended? Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to start referring to you like I used to Dr., Representative, Senator, Chairman, Secretary Price. You've been in so many different places. Appreciate your service to Georgia. I asked this yesterday of the university system, and I keep giving accolades to the Revenue Commissioner. I don't know if you were in the budget hearings or you happened to hear him. He talked about an extensive review of the telecommunication services and connectivity and so forth, and that they found phone lines that were being paid for on desks where nobody sat any longer and so forth. I know for a while when I came down here, I had a fax line that was being paid for in the office that I didn't know was there until I had been there for like 6 or 8 months, and they turned it off. So I would just ask you if you guys haven't done all of that to do it, because that's a place where dollars can go out of the budget and not hurt a thing.
Yes, sir.
You know,
I don't know for sure if we have or have not, but I've done that everywhere I've been, so we definitely will.
You've been around long enough to know that we're buying from the people that recommend what we buy. So
yes, sir.
we'll do the best we can with that. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, you ready for me to roll on?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, as we flip over to the big budget and we start, I wanted to hit the 4 agency-wide changes real quick as a global, just like I did with the DOAS number of 96,000. We have 4 items that cut across most of our programs and are more global agency-wide changes. As you probably realize, the TRS system has reduced the rate from 21.14 to 19.06, resulting in a savings. When you look at those numbers across all programs in our agency, that's about $2,300,686. We also have, as most agencies do, an increase in our cyber premiums. Across all programs, that's $2,429. We have a reduction related to our GTA charges, and we're not a GETS agency, but we do have some phone systems through that hub related to GTA. That reduction is $38,876. And then the pay raise money for those making $40,000 or less, when you look across all programs, is $1,587,621. When you net those numbers out, it's a net reduction of those 4 areas of $749,512. When we dive into the first program of adult education, the first items are all the same, and there's really only one change to adult ed, and it's tied to the exact thing that I presented in the supplemental budget. Instead of 4%, it is 6%. And it's $1,014,525, and that's those instructors that I mentioned related to those that provide adult education. In departmental admin, the first item below the statewide changes was 46.2.5. Once again, that's the same position we mentioned earlier as far as the deputy commissioner that's going to be partially funded by state and partially funded by other. 46.2.6 is that same $517,000 reduction that we talked about in the supplemental. 46.2.7 is an enhanced level of reduction in travel, and then an additional reduction related to software license for a total reduction of $179,536. 46.2.8 is once again that transfer of one position to technical education. That's the position that's related to the film industry. 46.2.9 is once again the reduction of the one vacant admin position that we talked about. 46.2.1 is a reduction of computer purchases in the amount of $15,600, and simply that's just us waiting another year for a refresh on computers. So that's not very many of them, but it's a little bit of help toward our 6% reduction. 46.2.11 is a transfer, and I mentioned this in the joint appropriations, and maybe when you heard from Regents, y'all talked about it again because I think they had a similar transfer. This is moving money from technical education into department admin in the amount of $26,694,938 in state funds, and total funds of $43,274,168. That transfer is a difference in where you allocate expenses. My understanding is years ago when we went to programmatic budgeting, and the goal was to make sure that the expenditures that are related to a program are identified with that program. Positions that work out of system office, that work on curriculum and Perkins and things of that nature that are for the schools, their cost was allocated to technical education. And this moving back into department ad, those positions do work out of system office. There's no impact to the schools, no impact to system office. It's just where that expense is shown. So most of that you're moving back into system office. That's about $9 million of that $26 million. The remaining amount of the $26 million is mainly the host of infrastructure related to different computer systems. So the library services we have, the banner system we use for enrollment. There's a list of about 10 or 15 of those type of computer solutions that in the past we have paid out of system office, but each of them were portioned out to the school that they go to, and they were moved. The expenses are now moved back into system office. So there's really no impact to the functioning or operations. It's really just where you recognize these expenses, and obviously that's not an issue to us as long as people don't think we're getting an extra $26 million in admin, because it's the same money. When you look at the last item, 46.212, this is funds for 4 positions transferred from technical education program to department administration utilizing existing other funds. This is a new item, $424,350. What this is we have a system foundation. The foundation is set there to raise money for the colleges. They have 4 positions that work in that foundation, and what we've been asked to do, and we're trying to put a plan together, is how does the money that's raised cover the cost of those positions allocated to fundraising? Yes, sir.
Real quick, Commissioner, Representative Mathiak, I think, may have had a question. I hate to.
No, I was thinking about the foundation money. I'm fine.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I had a blinking mic here.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'll have to bring you what our plan is on that. I've asked Julie that's over the foundation to sit down and brainstorm. Most of the monies we get today are typically dedicated, only because we hadn't ever structured it this way, but I think it's very doable. But today the monies are dedicated toward different purposes when we raise it. So I've asked her to sit down and come up with a plan on how, when she moves forward on fundraising for the foundation, it includes the cost of the personal services related to those individuals working for the foundation. So that's something that she's aware of and something that we've let our board know about. We'll be working on that plan as we move forward, but I think it's a legitimate request and something we need to consider. When you look at the total cut, if I take out, and I took some liberties when I did the percentages here, but to let you know exactly what I did, I took out the agency-wide changes, those 4 areas: TRS, cyber, GTA, and pay raise, and I also took out that $20 million transfer before I give you this number, so that you know what I did. Departmental Admin took a reduction of 17.34%. So once again, I do think that as you look at cuts in our budgets, that we should focus first on the administrative side before we look at the operation side.
And Commissioner, I guess my question is, and again, I know you just got thrown into this role, but as we look at the cuts and the instructions, it seems pretty heavy from a point of view of some of our calculations for fiscal year 21 is with a 6% cut, it's coming closer to 9.8,
yes, sir,
almost 10%, and that's where we're very concerned about. And I've heard a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're clear throughout this that some of this was not, this wasn't the recommendation that came out of technical college. These were things that happened after the recommendation had been turned in and that was submitted, in the budget.
Yes, sir. For the most part, these are the items that the college presented before I got here. Some of the items are brand new, though, as I've mentioned. Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, if we're going to, that's what concerns us is, we're seeing in some of these areas that the cuts are much larger than, the 6%, and that's sort of what is I think is concerning, especially in our technical colleges, because
yes,
you
sir,
and I both agree those are very important to our communities, our regions, and a lot of times at the heart of our communities.
That's right.
So I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
But Commissioner, following that, I mean, you've taken those in the administrative area.
Yes, sir.
That's not in classroom area, which is not to say that back office is not necessary, doesn't perform a necessary function, to provide the on the ground services. I'm going to assume, again, you just walked into here, but these were done in a way that you don't believe it will have an impact on the next semester's classes. I mean, I'm hoping that over time some of this occurred because positions were vacant and moves were made and we're more efficient than we were in 2017 and Is that true, or I mean?
Yes, sir. I think that's a valid statement. I think when you look at the additional cuts of the 517 and some other areas, those are positions that are either vacant or we're holding vacant as we move forward, and we believe we will be able to function. Obviously, obviously we always want bigger and better, but at the same time, during these times, I think we can function and provide the services. Yes, sir.
And one thing to follow up with Chairman Martin's question, on that lines, look, we do what we have to do, but one of the concerns is if we're seeing these reductions, at the colleges, especially with personnel, that's the biggest thing we have. If I had to guess, was
yes, sir.
The personnel cost. Are some of these extra cuts though? Are they detrimental to certain programs where we're trying to, like I said, get in experts? We're having a hard time already getting those instructors who are out there in industry, who we all would agree could make more money out there, actually in, working rather than teaching, and that's a concern that I think we have is how do we attract those quality instructors to make sure that our programs are likewise producing quality
yes, sir.
students.
Very fair statement. Very fair.
Chairman Sessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being here today. Do you know by chance, I know in the K-12 world, we've historically tried to sort of sort out what percentage of dollars are spent in the classroom and what percentage is spent sort of overhead. I have an hypothesis that your balance is within the spectrum of higher education is a little less heavy on the overhead side than the classroom side. Do you know what your percentages are?
Mr. Chairman, I can't answer that. That's a great question, though, but I'll be sure to get that for you. I'll look behind me and see if anybody else has that with them, but Penny, do you have anything? We'll look at that and get you an answer. What Laura had mentioned was she felt like probably around 80%, but we just need to get that answer for you.
Mr. Chairman, I asked the question because as we think about return on our dollar from an appropriation perspective, obviously there's diversity between the kinds of programs you offer and some of the ones the universities offer. But even if you're sort of neutral to what classes people are taking, you think about how far our dollar carries us in terms of classroom contact and impact versus perhaps other higher education settings. To me, it helps you tell your story.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And as we've looked at school districts in the K-12 world before, there was I think when we started, when Governor Perdue brought his 65% initiative, I believe the school district whose jurisdiction in which we're sitting right now spent about 49 to 50% in the classroom, and there are some jurisdictions that spent 70 to 72% in the classroom. So the dollar that we're appropriating in those places are dramatically different.
Yes, sir.
I'd love the information almost to help you tell your story, because I think a dollar cut here versus a dollar cut there has a difference in its impact at the point of service delivery.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate that. That's some great advice, and I think you're going to be spot on. Thank you. The other thing I would like to mention, I haven't got there yet, but I one of the things I would be remiss if I don't put out there is we did not take a cut and got a little ad in the technical education side. I'll get to that in just a minute. But we were very fortunate while we're taking the reductions in departmental ed, adult ed, economic development, when you get to the technical education side at the colleges, the core area of workforce development there, we did not take a reduction in that area, and in fact got a $3.5 million ad for the formula funding. We'll talk about that in just a second. And I may be there right now because the next few items are identical to the supplemental budget. As you look at economic development, those are once again those four positions we mentioned earlier in the welding and industrial maintenance just continued forward. And then in quick start, the increase went to the 6%, which is $680,000, which does impact the training area. And then the last item is technical education. When you get past the four items that I mentioned are statewide changes, the one big item is what I mentioned earlier, and that's the slight increase in our formula. We had a 1.5% increase in credit hours for a little over 3.7 million. We had a slight decrease in our square footage, which offset it for the total amount of $3.5 million. So we do thank the governor's office for that recommendation, and obviously would ask for your support to continue with that $3.5 million ad. And then you see the item where it was transferred from Tech Ed to Department Admin that I mentioned earlier, and that's just the function of moving where those expenses are seen.
Real quick, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
We had a decrease in square footage. Do you got any information regarding that?
Yep, and I'm sitting here going blank on what it is. So I'm on. I may need to call a friend behind me here.
What is it? You've got a lifeline?
I got a lifeline.
Absolutely, absolutely.
When we calculate our formula, we use the square footage that's reported in BLIP at the latest point in time before our formula is turned in for the September budget. Sometimes there's going to be fluctuations in timing, but the biggest fluctuation in timing was the addition of the Hall County campus for Lanier Tech and the removal of the old Lanier Tech Oakwood campus. The Hall County campus was a little bigger. Board of Regents took Oakwood from us after the fiscal year had already started this year. So there was at one point we were maintaining both campuses. When it was time to do the budget for 21, we removed Oakwood. And even though we did add some more square footage in 21, we did have a positive add. We did have a $46,000 net decrease, and it was really the timing of that campus coming on and the other one going out.
Mr. Chairman, Penny did a great job articulating that to me about 2 days ago, and I'm glad she was here to articulate it again. But it's really the offset.
Lifeline.
Yep, really the offset of that new facility of the old one coming offline. Just to give you an idea, I mentioned this in the joint appropriations, but when you look at our total square foot, we're about 13.03 million square foot when you take all of our facilities, and when you take the value of that, it's about 2.8 billion when you look at the value of our facilities. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the supplemental and the big budget. We do have a bond package. I don't know if you intend to cover that today or not.
Yes, if you don't mind, could you review that with us?
We only have 4 items in there, so it'll be a quick review. We were blessed to be awarded by the governor's recommendation. Would obviously ask for your support in these 4 areas, but especially in our major improvements and renovations, the MRR money. It's $10 million included in the bond package for those items, and then $10 million for equipment refresh. Obviously, you guys know the importance of the education we provide, and if we don't keep the training equipment up, that's what that $10 million is. That's the equipment we're teaching our kids on. That's vital to make sure we're up to date. The next 2 items are a little bit bigger, and this is the furniture and fixtures for the 2 facilities that were funded in the prior budget years in the bond package, and that's the building down at Wiregrass and the new campus at West Georgia, and that's $13.9 million. And then there's a request for an additional building at Gwinnett Tech for $34.8 million. That's a renovation in addition to Building 100 there. And that facility offers anything from cyber to, and I've got that somewhere too, I'm blank on it, but cyber and a host of other items, Mr. Chairman. I can get those for you.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? If not, Commissioner, I really appreciate it. Again, I enjoyed our discussion, and I look forward to having you back to maybe do a deeper dive. Again, some of these issues, and as we are trying to address these budget cuts to make sure that our resources are allocated properly.
Yes, sir.
Again, going back to my conversation, we know that what we do is so important with our technical colleges. And as we're getting people out and prepared for the workforce, the different certifications, the different skill sets that are out there demand different levels of instruction. They demand different levels of, just like you said, equipment to train on. You and I had a discussion about aviation
Yes, sir.
You know, we know that that is a program that is much more intensive, especially an FAA, you know, the certified programs. But those are also some of the highest demand, you know, areas in which we're seeing the highest demand for, and we're seeing, you know, as we forecast the need and demand for those
Yes, sir.
those jobs, they're squarely looking us in the face. So, you know, that kind of program versus maybe you name another one that is maybe not as intensive or as expensive to put on. That's where I've got some concern, and I've got some concern from a budgetary point of view that we want to make sure that we're putting these resources into those areas, those high demand areas, and those areas where, quite frankly, you know, some of these folks are getting out and then within years are making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, and there is a economic need across this state. But I don't want to make sure that in these budget cuts we're focusing and we're ignoring those types of demand, while at the same time bolstering numbers in other areas and other skills and certifications that, quite frankly, they're cheaper to put on.
Yes, sir.
They're cheaper to get people out. It keeps our numbers going. That is my concern.
Yep.
And I think your vision and what we talked about addresses that. I just want to make sure that we have the resources that we need to really focus in on those areas. And so, you know, I appreciate you being here. I know this was sort of hard with you coming in, you know, very new and getting thrown into this situation with our budget. But we're going to make it, and we're going to make sure that we do, you know, do an intense dive in this. And that's why I look forward to having you back, because I want to make sure you've got the resources to do what we need to do across the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your support, your concern, and I hear you loud and clear on the alignment of what jobs are needed in the areas that will make our communities and our citizens successful. I think that's the key.
Yeah, not just to have a technical college that is just putting people out there, but those jobs are you know, are meeting those demands and are needed.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Look forward to having you back, Commissioner, and again, looking forward to working with you and your team.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
All right, who's next? Yeah. All right, student finance.
If it's easier, we can just run right down the tracking document if you don't have handouts of our slides. And
Yeah.
Okay, if you've got those, then I think that'll be more than sufficient. So, Mr. Chairman, anytime you're ready, I'll wait for your lead.
Love technology, don't you? Go ahead.
We'll cut the budget on this thing.
Yeah.
that's-
We do have an overhead projector, or, you know, you can write.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Knight and members of the committee. It's an honor to be with you this afternoon. Again, my name is Andy Parsons, and I'm an Executive Vice President with Georgia Student Finance. I'm
Oh, sorry, it starts working.
okay. Continuing to pinch hit until a new president is named. So appreciate your support in the interim. Last week when we met at the joint hearing, shared a little bit of the agency overview and initiatives, some of the highlights from fiscal year 2019, In the interest of time today, we're not going to cover any of those, and we'll just jump straight to the budget if that's okay. The slides that we prepared for you, the handouts that you have, pretty much run right down the tracking sheet. They're exactly the same that we shared with you last week with all of the detail. No real changes except for we've added the house tracking reference numbers. That's about it. There's a few overarching themes that I just want to mention again as we get ready to get into the tracking sheet, which really just kind of paints the picture of how we approached our cuts. I think that's what most people are interested in. And so I'll cover those and then pass it off to my partner, Brian Lipton, as our budget manager, and he'll cover the tracking sheet items. The good news for us was all of our program budgets, such as HOPE, were exempt from the cuts. So only our commission administration was affected. That's the only program. We were able to meet our 4% and 6% budget reduction goals without any furloughs or layoffs, so that was great for us. And our approach was essentially the same as many others, to minimize impact to our constituents and find ways to be more efficient. So we've done some of the things such as the telecom review, things like that you've talked about. So those are good. We'll share some of those details. In regard to the budget reductions, I'll go ahead and give you most of the details that you'll see in our slides. We had 3 small call centers within Georgia Student Finance, and we have combined those 3. Each of them had 4 to 6 employees. There were 2 vacancies among those 3 teams. We brought them together as one big group, and we were able to eliminate some of the vacancies, the 2 vacancies. That reorganization was effective January 1st. And so we have eliminated those 2 vacancies. We're currently cross-training those staff. It's been about a month. So far, so good. Another part of that reorganization was we brought together our loan originations, disbursement, and servicing teams. Again, those were multiple small teams. We brought them all together. We had 2 additional vacancies between those groups that we were able to eliminate. We also had a 5th position that was vacant. It was a financial analyst position. Earlier in the year, we had already taken the duties and spread them across other employees, and so we had decided to leave that position vacant. We also eliminated that one as part of the reduction. Something I spent a little bit of time talking about last week was our compliance reviews. So as you may be aware, we have 82 post-secondary institutions around the state that that participate in our programs. So each year we go visit about 1/3 of them. So anywhere from 28 or 29 or so, sometimes somebody gets a repeat visit. Obviously, we take a team to those locations around the state, incurs a significant amount of travel. So this year we are piloting a new project that we're referring to as a remote examination. So instead of driving to all locations, we'll have some of them just electronically submit data to us. We'll do essentially a desk review in our Tucker office and just communicate back and forth electronically. So that's going to save a significant amount of travel for us. We also had 2 additional vacancies that we needed to fill, but one of them was through a retirement, another one was a long-term employee that had left, but essentially over the years those salary levels had gotten a little bit higher. So in the interim, after they had vacated, we restructured those roles, reduced the salary levels, and then the amount of time that those positions were vacant gave us some additional savings. So again, saving money by reducing the salary range and also during the amount of time that the positions were vacant.
Real quick, what in those positions were again?
One of them was initially it was a communications lead, an area I don't remember. I think it was associate vice president of communications, and one of them was an associate
vice president for K-12 outreach.
Right. And so with those retirements, again, we reduced kind of the levels of those positions, lowered the salary range, and then the savings that we had while it was vacant, which was several months while we went through the rehiring process.
So are those positions rehired?
Yes, sir.
Because I know one of the things that I think in the past we've seen, from student finance is the communication, the outreach, that is, communicating what's out there.
Absolutely, that's critical
so
for us.
I want to make sure that has not diminished in any way.
No, sir. So the original 5 positions that I first covered, those were vacancies we determined that we could go without after we did our reorganization. These 2 we could not. So we did decide to restructure the role a little bit and kind of downgraded the level, but essentially they're performing a very similar function. So. I am, yeah, saving a little, don't tell OPB. We don't need to give anything else back. We also, like everybody else, just reviewing everybody that's going to a conference, the meeting, how many people are going, where they're going, reducing cost anywhere we can there. Also with supplies and printing costs, as you just mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we have a significant outreach effort, and so a lot of printing goes into that, looking at reducing those costs where we can. And the last thing I'll spend just a little bit of time on is around technology. Last year in amended 19, you approved a $605,000 enhancement that went to our cybersecurity and infrastructure improvements. And so for us, that really helped to modernize a lot of our legacy hardware and software. Ultimately, being able just to redo several contracts and essentially the way we do business with a couple different technologies, it has enabled us to save money this year as well as next year and ongoing years, quite frankly. So those funds, in addition, went into the cut, as well as you'll see line items on computer refresh like many other organizations. We're just delaying that computer refresh until almost a break-fix model. So those are the kinds of things that you'll see when Brian, kind of steps through the slides. But I just wanted to kind of paint the picture from a high level. When we went through our strategic planning process, those are the items we identified and ultimately selected for the cuts.
So let me make sure. No, that may be later in the budget. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're okay with that, sir, then Brian will go ahead and start walking us through amended, and we're also prepared to talk about the big budget.
Okay.
Thank you again for the opportunity to present our budget recommendations. Before we dive right back in, just one more friendly reminder of our structure. GSFC's administrative costs are centralized into one budgetary program, Commission Administration. So all of our other programs are 100% pass-through in the form of financial aid to students. All of our scholarship, grant, and loan programs were exempt from the 4% and 6% budget reductions. So the Commission Administration is the only program where we'll see those changes. And so with that, I'll plan to just dive right in and follow along with your tracking sheet, starting with line item 44.1.1, which is a statewide change. It's the Doas self-insurance adjustment. That's just our portion that went, that affected every other agency in the state, $58,000 increase. The next four changes make up our 4% budget reduction plan, which totals $496,000. Starting with line item 41.1.2, we have a $422,000 reduction to personal services, $271,000 from eliminating the 5 vacant positions that we identified during our strategic planning process, and $151,000 from reducing 2 starting salaries that had increased due to years of service. The next line item is 41.1.3. It's a $27,000 reduction in computer charges based on delaying that computer refresh and through some reduced maintenance costs after some upgrades we implemented last year.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to roll through it and then take questions, or
Either way,
can I ask, and I've been away from asking this question for a number of years. The self-insurance program to DOAS, is that just your property casualty that you pay through? What is that?
That's just a statewide if that's just our portion, we get a bill from DOAS.
Okay. So
And that's all calculated through the governor's office, OPB.
all right, and you're insuring what?
Through insurance, it's not cybersecurity, it's for our building, for employees.
Well, so this is what we used to see as a GBA. You're not paying. You have another bill for GBA if you were in a GBA building. So this is
we own our building,
Right.
so we don't get that one.
right, but I mean, so I guess where I'm going with this, because this happens occasionally, or it used to, is like, so what's your total outlay to DOAS for that program if we went up $58,000 this year?
This is the same. There's a very similar line item on all other agencies.
I'm
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, but what was your-
I meant to ask the other folks. I meant to ask the Commissioner Dozier here. So this is not necessarily pointed at you
Right.
guys. I know you get a bill, you have to pay for it. Do you know what expense you have though?
If you don't mind, let us get the
We can get back
details.
to
So
it.
we can
No,
talk about
that's
it
fine.
more fully.
Because this is not an indictment of your piece of the organization. But GBA used to be really bad about. I won't say really bad. I guess I am. We're on. Yeah, I'm there. GBA, how you doing? Now, but in all seriousness, they would just go up in rents. While their rents was cutting the budget, they would find a way to go up in rents. And if you're getting, I just wonder if this is an increase due to actual losses, or, you know, if we're self-insured but we're co-insured and our premium went up. So I was just looking at your whole outlay, because you're doing a good job trimming back as they ask, but then you have to write this check and you don't get to shop around, if you will. So just trying to help you look after it. Thanks.
Okay. Our next item, 41.1.4, is a $34,000 reduction in regular operating expenses. Those are going to be savings recognized through the desk audits that Andy had mentioned, limiting the number of people who attend certain conferences and trainings, and reducing printing costs to focus additional resources online. The final commission administration line item is 41.1.5, is a $12,000 reduction in contracts, primarily IT contracts, made possible by the IT enhancement that we had received last year. So the net change to commission admin is a decrease of $438,000.
To go back in your defense, I'm stepping in again, but you really decreased $58,000 more than that, because you had the ET increase. I mean, that speaks well of.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you. There are no changes to the next several programs, so we'll move to the HOPE programs. These recommendations are not reduction to the HOPE programs. They're actually just true-ups to reflect the projected need in those programs. There's no reduction to the award amounts to students, and we're still projecting growth in all of the HOPE programs over the previous year. So line item 44.6.1 is a $1.5 million reduction to HOPE GED.
Wait, hold on a second. You're saying this is to meet the demand, right?
Yes, sir.
But if it's a decrease, so we're saying is the demand is less.
Is less than the current appropriation, so we're just adjusting the budget down to meet that demand rather than with the current appropriation.
But you're seeing an increase in, you said an increase where?
Yes, so in HOPE grant, as an example, last year our disbursements in HOPE grant were about $56 million. The budget is $66 million, and we're adjusting down to the projection of $61 million.
Okay. All right.
So the first line item on here is HOPE GED. We're adjusting down by $1.5 million to about $420,000, and that's consistent with the disbursements we've seen in that program over the last several years. The next line item is HOPE grant, and so that is to meet the updated projection of $61.7 million. So the $4.5 million reduction is just an adjustment down. The two scholarship programs, HOPE Public and HOPE Private, each have two line items to represent the split between the HOPE Scholarship and Zell Miller Scholarship portions of those programs, where Zell represents the portion paid above and beyond what HOPE pays. So in HOPE Scholarship Private, for the whole program, the HOPE portion increased by $930,000, and the Zell Miller portion reduced by $155,000 for a net increase of $775,000 to meet the projected need for some growth in that program. HOPE Public, there's a $2.2 million decrease to HOPE Scholarship and $7.6 million decrease to Zell Miller Scholarship, for a total reduction of about $9.9 million. And so similar to HOPE Grant, last year.
Hold on, I think we got a question
Yes,
now.
sir.
I hate to interrupt you, but I want to make sure we get to them as the members. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you're on a good roll there. Sorry for stopping you. Do you have good numbers for your full-time equivalent scholarship recipients for the HOPE Private and then the full HOPE Public programs? Do you have those available?
You mean total students who receive awards?
Total or total full-time equivalent, however you track. Do you track it by FTE, or do you track it?
We have students received and as well as awards received, so yes, sir, we can provide those.
And we don't have to have it here across the table. I'd like to get it today. I want to see where that number is. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Chairman Martin.
And to be clear, because there's been a couple of things here in the public relative to the public defender's budget and how that was being cut, and it's been reported slightly. I'm sure it won't surprise anybody that it's been reported slightly different than it actually is on the ground. These are not. You're not taking any money away from anybody qualified to go on COPE. You're just right-sizing it for budgetary reasons. Because if you didn't do this, it would ultimately, you wouldn't spend it at the end of the year and it would fall back. And so you're just properly reflecting the numbers. That said, when you get to this, can you give us an idea of what the reserve balance in the hope would be at the end of FY 2020, or if not today, have that in another.
Yes, sir.
Because I know we're building that fund up because of some changes, so thank you.
Yes, sir. So just to follow up on the Hope Public line items, 49.1.1 and .2, it's a $2.2 million decrease to Hope Public, a $7.6 million decrease to Zell Miller Public, for a total program decrease of 9.9. The updated projection is $693 million, and the current appropriation is $703 million. So we're just adjusting down to meet that projected need. So there's no additional amended year changes to the GSFC budget. Just as a summary, we didn't have any changes to state general funds. A $15.5 million decrease as a result of those statewide changes, the 4% budget reduction to administration, and those adjustments to the HOPE program projections. We have included INPEC on our summary slide. They're attached to us for administrative purposes, so just so that our total bottom line matches what's in your tracking document. So the total net decrease in amended 20 is $15,582,310.
May I ask you a question? I know it's an attached agency, but or attached to the agency for administrative purposes, but the non-public post-secondary education commission, will you let the committee know a little bit more about that? And then, if it's attached, where did that budget number come from?
They're scheduled to come up right after us.
Okay.
Might be better.
Is that
able to speak to.
Yeah, Executive Director Kirk Shook they're on deck right behind us today, so if you don't mind, we'll save that for them.
all right?
Thanks, sir. We'll move right into FY 21. So back to Commission Administration. The first 4 line items are statewide adjustments, starting with a $9,800 decrease to reflect that TRS rate adjustment, a $690 increase for Doas cybersecurity premiums, and an $85 decrease for GETS GTA fee. We're very appreciative of the next line item in line 41.1.4, an increase of $5,893,000 to provide a $1,000 pay raise to full-time regular employees for current salaries with a salary of $40,000 or less. So the next 4 line items make up our 6% reduction plan, which totals $633,000. Of that total, about $530,000 is for personal services. Most of that is carryover from the 5 eliminated positions and 2 reduced salaries in the amended recommendation, but there are additional savings in FY 21 from eliminating 2 more positions that will become vacant following planned retirements in the coming months, and reducing the starting salary of 1 additional position. Line item 41.1.6 is a $27,000 reduction in computer charges, which mirrors the amended year reduction. Line item 41.1.7 is a $64,000 reduction to regular operating expenses. We've carried over the ROE changes from the amended year and then made further reductions in printing, travel, and marketing. The $12,000 reduction to contracts in line 41.1.8 again mirrors the amended year recommendation. So our total combined changes to Commission Administration FY 21 are $636,000.
Questions?
Question, I don't recall, you were budgeted an amount in this year's budget for the software upgrade. And that was in this portion of the budget?
The computer refresh?
Right.
Yes, sir.
Well, for the computer refresh, I thought you software project overall to upgrade the software system.
The project I mentioned, the $605,000, was amended in 19.
It was 19,
So
okay,
you-
because
so
I was
we-
wondering why it didn't come out of the 21 budget.
We amended 19, but we've implemented all this year,
Okay,
so we're,
there you
so
go.
we're now
Because I was
receiving
just
the
looking,
savings.
you see where I'm going with that.
Yes,
If it
sir.
was put in for a single price, it should be backed out of the next, I got
Yes,
you.
sir.
Sir.
Just, it was implemented in 20,
Yes, sir.
budget in 20. Sure.
Okay.
Questions?
We'll again move to the HOPE programs, starting with HOPE GED in 44.6.1, has a reduction of $1.5 million based on the projected need, and this is the same as the amended year recommendation for HOPE GED. In FY 21,
Chairman Sutton.
on a percentage basis, that's a pretty dramatic change from 1.9 million down to 421. I haven't calculated the percentage. What's the story behind that?
So just the adjustment down, the truing up that we were.
Yeah, I mean, that's a massive shift in the overall program. What's not working in the program, or what's the story there that you would have a reduction of, that looks like is that an 80% reduction?
I don't know what that exact number is, but what I can tell you, and obviously my partners at the technical college system, run the program. And so over the years, the GED award, just the number of students that are receiving their GED, accomplishing that at the end of the year, have come down. There were changes years ago. I was there for 18 years, so I kind of lived through some of it, but to changes in the GED program, so the award amounts have gone down for years, and just like Commissioner Dozier is expressing now, I mean, there's initiatives to kind of drive those numbers back up, but to date, they've been relatively flat for the last few years.
Is it the more kids are getting diplomas? I mean, is it, as we've tackled the dropout rate in high school and we're getting a larger percentage of diplomas, is that driving the GED percentage of the kids going on to?
Yeah, that would probably be a better question for my partners at TCSG.
Just out of interest, I wasn't sure.
We're really good at paying them, yeah.
Yeah.
But we don't find them. Thank you.
So our other HOPE programs have increases in FY21, starting with HOPE Grant, which has a projected increase of $245,000. HOPE Scholarship Private has a $4.8 million increase to the HOPE portion and $1.5 million increase to the Zell Miller portion, for a total program increase of $6.2 million. And then we're projecting continued strong growth in HOPE Public, a $44.3 million increase to HOPE Scholarship and $5.1 million increase to the Zell Miller portion, which nets to a total program increase of $49.4 million to meet the projected need.
I've got two questions. Let's go back to the amended. We're on the tracking sheet.
Yeah.
So hold on a second. So let me make sure I'm getting this. And again, these are trends, and maybe this is the amended budget. We had, with the HOPE Scholarship Public Funds, we'd originally budgeted $703 million, correct?
Yes, sir.
So we had a true up between public schools and Zell Miller of, $9.8 million. So it went down, right? But when I look at it from, going into the next year, it looks, yeah, but it's a big jump. I mean, why the fluctuation in the numbers? So we're starting with 703 when we just amended the budget down to 693. Okay, which is a true up of actual number. But then it jumps up, 50, almost, right, $49.4 million. So what? Those trends and numbers don't. Something doesn't.
So the total program disbursements last year in 19 were around $615 million. We're projecting that number to jump up close to $693 million this year. And then next year from the 693, it'll increase up to that $50 million increase to over $750 million.
I just happen to have from a presentation you guys had made earlier this year, the expenditures going back to 1999.
They're wrestling with predicting what the growth's going to be.
And,
Yes,
and that's what I'm saying.
The projections
615 to 703, and now you're going to go up to 762.
Yes, sir.
They're kind of guessing what the growth's going to be.
Again, that's guessing. I mean, we don't have any better data from that perspective of getting more dialed in.
The projections assume that HOPE scholarship portion will grow by about 4%, and the Zell Miller scholarship portion will grow by 16%, and that's consistent with the trends we've seen over the past several years. So they are based on actuals that we've seen, the growth that we saw from 18 over to 19.
to the chairman, I mean, when you really look at it, it's a lot of money. I mean, it's $9 million, but when you, it's just over 1%, you know, of the total money expenditure.
I get it,
so,
but
yeah.
it's still, I would have thought that I don't know how many students, you know, still the dollar amount's material,
Yes.
okay? And whether, I mean, from a point of view of the change, I don't know how many students that represent. Maybe that's something I may get you offline and get a little more detail, okay?
Yes, sir.
I just would think that our forecasting would certainly be a little bit better than
Our
you know,
forecasting
we
is
over forecast last year, and we're coming back and amended, and we'll talk about it.
yes, sir.
Yes.
If you guys been able to look at where the growth in the Hope Scholarship really is, I mean, if you parse the numbers, is it non-traditional students? Is it kids' GPAs going up, so fewer kids are losing the Hope, so they're staying enrolled? Where is the growth, really?
We have looked at that, and it's combination. It's mostly kids that are coming straight out of high school. It's an increase in students who are eligible for Zell Miller Scholarship out of high school, and then retaining it for a little bit longer.
So high school GPAs are going up.
And then once they get into college, they're maintaining it for longer.
So we can debate whether high school, you know, I won't editorialize, but the high school GPAs are going up in measurable ways, so more kids are qualifying. Their core Hope GPA at 3.0 is a reality for more kids, and then they're availing themselves of Hope in our public system. Yeah. And then you're saying they're retaining them. Is the retention rate been constant, or has that been going up a little bit? I know that's always a concern.
The Zell Miller students
Yes.
tend to retain at a higher level than normal Hope students, but
Yeah.
there's other factors that drive that out of high school, that initial eligibility. I mean, our increases in dual enrollment, increases in APIB, all of there's additional weighting go into that calculation, and so.
Oh, I see. So if kids are taking dual enrollment, they get a GPA boost, and that GPA kick really helps get them over. I gotcha. Interesting.
All right.
We don't have any other changes in FY21, so that will conclude. We have a summary of our changes. Again, no increase to state general funds for GSFC programs. A $53.8 million increase to lottery funds based on a combination of our 6% budget reduction plan, increases to Hope based on projected growth. And then we have a recommended decrease of $72,000 for our attached agency INPEC. So the total program net increase agency increase is $53.7 million.
Questions from the members? But one last question. I'm trying to get my arms around this. You know, as we look at these cuts. Obviously, you know, we keep hearing, hey, we're gonna make do. We're gonna make sure that we can we can accommodate the cuts without effective services. But let me ask the question a different way. You know, what if you were not faced with these cuts? You know, what would the agency do with excess funds for these personnel services? I mean, you know, were we over budgeting coming into this thing, or
We certainly wouldn't feel that way. As an example, with the 5 positions that we had vacant, some of those were new positions. So those were things that, hey, if we ever get enough funds, we'd like to create a position to do this. And one of those positions was never filled. We never got the opportunity to fill it. We gave it, so basically we gave right back. And so those are the kind of things that if we're currently working a lot of our outreach initiatives, if we can do more in that area.
yeah, but
So
again, the question goes to, you know, what if you weren't faced with the cuts? You know, where would these funds go? What would you have done with them? And
Well, the two main areas that I think where we were focused in on is our outreach and advocacy, as well as our call centers. And so as we went through the reorganization, so we think our call center is going to be fine. But if we had not done that, that's where those positions were slated. That obviously is a very important initiative for the governor. It's an important initiative for us. As you get into July and August, our call centers are slammed because all the kids are getting ready for fall semester. That's your big semester. The mamas, daddies, family, students, everybody's calling. And so we certainly would have had more bodies available there. We think through the reorganization, we've essentially brought more bodies to the table by bringing them out of different groups. So it will work. But if we had not had the cuts, that's exactly where those positions would have been.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate your presentation, and we'll go through the budget, but we may have some more questions. And again, thank you for what you do, and for what the commission does, and very important component of education in Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your support.
All right, next we have Kurt Shook with then there's my question. Non-public Post-Secondary Education Commission. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to address you guys today. I want to take just a few minutes before I got into the budget matters, which I know is what we're really here for today. Just take a few minutes to talk about our agency because I know there's a little bit of a lot of folks don't understand some of the things we do, so you can understand that as we get into talk about a few of the cuts. Maybe you'll understand those just a little bit better. NPEC, Non-Public Post-Secondary Education Commission, used to be in the Department of Education. 1990 was pulled out as a separate entity and has been since. We operate under guidelines OCGA 20-3-250.6. Those are our minimum standards that our agency uses to determine if a private school should operate here in the state, and that's what our staff uses to make those judgments. Our purpose, just in general terms, just to give you just a general idea, essentially our mission statement, we look to see that institutions are financially stable and educationally sound. It does a few things when we look at that. It helps to assure students when they go to some of these institutions, which as you'll see, there's quite a few in the state of Georgia in just a minute. It helps to ensure prospective employers, those who are hiring some of our students, and it assures the public, you guys, that the money that you're spending, that you're spending it wisely on what we're doing in our agency. Authorization is what we do. Each private institution in the state must apply for a certificate of authorization if they're not exempt, and I'll mention that in just a second. And that's what we mostly focus on, is the authorized institutions. And each program that they offer must be authorized by our agency as well. And these authorizations are renewed annually. So this is a process that each of our regulatory specialists go through every year to ensure the financial stability and educational soundness of each of these institutions. And any institution that's not operating in compliance, it's not authorized, we have authority in law to be able to go after them and shut them down for operating, advertising, any of those types of things. And there's been several while I've been executive director. Right now at a year. I was told out in the hallway that I'm kind of the wily veteran now. You know, you see these two folks in here, they were brand new. That was me last year. Our exempt institutions, just to give you an idea of some of the other schools that we have, certain regulatory oversight, but much less. It may just be applications or reviewing their finances or along those lines. The traditional private colleges, like the GICA schools, which you're going to hear from Dr. Baxter here in just a few minutes, they would fall in the exempt category. Occupational schools like Cosmetology, Board of Nursing, you of course know that's under those various boards at the Secretary of State's office. Things like truck driving schools would be through the Department of Driver Services. Religious exempt institutions, and they have to meet certain criteria for that. Or institutions that may be avocational in nature, so they're operating something that's not going to lead to a job. Another thing that's important about our agency and what we do, since 2015, our agency is the agency that houses the Georgia SARA program, and if you don't know what that is, for a school to offer online education to out-of-state students, whether they are here or another state, whatever. They can avoid some of the fees and things they have to go to operate in each and every state, because if, say, for example, Young Harris College, who is a member, that's my alma mater, that's a member of Georgia SARA, if they wanted to teach folks in North Carolina online education, they would have to pay fees and all of those other things to my agency partner in North Carolina or in Tennessee or in South Carolina or whatever other state. But since they're a member of Georgia SARA and those states are also a member of NC-SARA, the national organization, they only have to pay the fees to be part of our program, and then they get the benefits to be able to teach nationwide. So our agency houses that, what's called the state portal entity, and allows that to happen. So just a few stats as you might want to know for there. In that position, we have 74 institutions that we renew annually, and to date, since 2015, we have saved USG's, TCSG, and GICA schools in the neighborhood of about $9 million in fees for offering programs, online education to all these in all these other states beyond the state of Georgia. So some pretty nice cost savings in the last several years. Again, a few more numbers here. Out-of-state students attending our Georgia SARA institutions, so those 74 schools, almost 51,000, and then about 65,000 students that live in Georgia but are attending some school that's outside of the state of Georgia online education. One of the other things that we do as an agency is that during a closure, we can offer assistance to students through our Tuition Guarantee Trust Fund, which our agency manages. We maintain academic records as well. We just had a big closure last March right after I came on in Argosy University. We've been managing those academic records and trying to help students with refunds where appropriate there. And we have our staff that is responsible taking care of transcripts, records, all of that. Again, just a few more things that you might find interesting. As of FY19, the close of FY19, we had 289 institutions that we oversaw. That number has grown to, I believe, 308 or 309 as of today. So it's been an emphasis while I've been here to try to grow the number of schools that we have authorized so that we can offer more programs. They can offer more programs to students here in the state. You can see some of the other for-profit, not-for-profit, degree granting, non-degree granting. As far as that goes, about split down the middle. And you can see most of them are physically present here, offering in-person education. Accreditation, which is different, that's where the feds get involved with the accreditors like SACS and things like that. You can see a number of our schools are accredited, but another chunk are unaccredited as well. And then a map here that might interest you as well, just to see where our staff covers. We're located in Tucker. We're housed in the same building Georgia Student Finance is. But our schools are all over the state. The concentration is around the Atlanta area because that's where the population is. But you can see there's a lot in other places as well. Up in Lafayette, there's a horseshoeing school that we regulate. Down to the coast, we have Embry-Riddle and Pooler that does aeronautical, mechanical, engineering, that type thing. So, and then Colquitt County just came on here back in the fall with Georgia College of Osteopathic Medicine there in South Georgia and Moultrie. So, and that's just a few of them, but so it's widespread all over the state. I told you about some numbers here. This just gives you an idea of the number of students that attend the schools regulated by NPEC. It's approaching 200,000, and 90% of those students go to accredited universities. And then this is a number when the former TCSG Commissioner Matt Arthur had a difficult time with here, was that our schools, and this number's down a little bit, it was almost $1 billion at the end of fiscal year 18. At the end of fiscal year 19, it had gone down a bit, but it's still $876 billion that students spend at the schools that we regulate here in the state as of June 30th. And that's just a breakdown of the tuition. Again, most of them are at the accredited institutions, $830 million versus just about $47 million with non-accredited institutions. So that's our agency, just in a nutshell. I want to give you talk about that just a second so you would understand what we do as we get into our budget and where we are. So the current budget that we're operating under, the FY20 budget that was approved last session, that's our budget by object class, and you can see, as with a lot of agencies, our biggest number is our personal services, almost 92% of our budget. So right at $1 million is what our budget was as of last year. For our cuts, I don't have the tracking numbers and those things because we're so small. I didn't figure it would be necessary, so I could show this on a PowerPoint slide, all those cuts. So the recommended changes from the governor's office, almost $70,000, $69,700 in amended fiscal year 20. Here are the object classes and the cuts that are coming there. Number one recommendation is to reduce funds for personal services by $57,000. No job losses, no furloughs in our agency. That's mostly in a salary difference between executive directors. Second is our reduction in funds for commission meetings and travel. We just had our last commission meeting last week, or earlier this week, and we're looking to do cuts to the number of in-person meetings. We just had a virtual meeting of our commission, so that's saving per diems and travel and mileage and those things, as well as some of our agency travel with some of our budget reductions there as well, with looking to way to cut some of our cost savings there. Thirdly, the third recommendation is to utilize some of those Georgia SARA funds. I mentioned what Georgia SARA was earlier. It's a self-sustaining program in that institutions that participate pay fees into that program, and so we're going to utilize some of those funds to offset the cost of the individual that is housed in our agency. That was not done in the past, so we're going to use some of those funds to offset the operational costs that come about with that position in our office.
Wait, back up for a second.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I was looking at my budget document, and specifically, when it says other funds, it other federal funds, other funds. That's just very broad. So tell me where these other funds were sitting that we had, or where we're taking other funds from that we no longer have to expend on whatever the other use was or previous use was. This is something that's starting to. It's curious.
Yeah.
And I know your amount's not much, so I'm not picking on you.
Right.
But this is a theme that I'm seeing, and I just, it's such a nondescript.
Right. Well, we have a couple pots of money. Of course, we have the pot of money that's appropriated to the agency, which is about $1 million. We take in fees between $1.3 and $1.4 million a year. Most of those are remitted to the Office of the State Treasury. There's a portion of those funds that we retain in the agency called special purpose revenue, which we're going to use to help fill some budget holes that we may potentially have based on the budget cuts. But this is specifically referring to the Georgia SARA funds. It's the program that, since we are the state portal entity, when that was started in 2015, we have been collecting funds from the recipient schools that benefit from that, the 74 institutions. And that has been used to pay a portion of the salary and benefits of the position that was there, but not 100%. The way that it was drawn up in the Memorandum of Understanding with the University System of Georgia and the Technical College System of Georgia and the private institutions that we enter into an agreement with is that the funds that are raised, and it's all determined based upon FTE count. The school, based on your FTE count, you pay a certain number to us to operate, and so we take those funds in. The GA SARA coordinator is the person who administers the program, makes sure everything is done on our end. So what had happened before I came in, they were not using those funds to fund the position completely. Computer usage, rent, those types of things. Our agency budget, our annual operating budget, was used to fund a lot of those portions. And so I'm trying to write that and allow that position to be self-sustaining. One of the ways that we're doing that is by back in October, our commission approved a fee increase on the Georgia Sarah participating institutions so that it could be self-funding and we don't have to use our budget, our annual operating budget, to fund that. And so that's where those other funds are coming from to do that.
So in essence, we're raising fees and pushing that cost to University System, Technical College System, and our private
That's
colleges.
Right. And it's about a third, a little bit more for USG, and then about a little bit less than that for TCSG, and then the third for the private institutions. Yes, sir.
Chairman Martin.
Thank you for being here with us. And this, again, you landed here last year, and this is probably a practice that long predates you there, but I'm unclear what statutory authority you have not to remit all that money to the state treasury. There may be, but I mean,
the OPB has.
Yeah, well, I mean, due respect, OPB doesn't make the law. I mean, we had that thing happen in corrections many years ago where the commissioner for years and years, and it become common practice that they would keep commissary funds that they raised from charging our guests
Right.
in the corrections department, very high rates on telephone usage. And when we went through the tough budget times in 2008, we found multi-million dollars. I mean, $20 to $30 million a year they were keeping to do stuff with that were not budgeted. So, belabor the chairman's committee today on that, but I'd like to understand the statutory authority for it, because if it's okay, if that's the proper thing to do, I want to give you statutory authority to do it, and we'll do that through, should the speaker, send the bill our way in higher ed, we'll do that. I just don't want to put you in a situation or anybody that comes in there after you to go that, and you're leaning back like that's what OPB direction is. I don't want to get sideways with, I guess, the people that keep the purse strings out of the executive branch. But Chairman Knight's committee here needs to see, in my opinion, Chairman Knight, all the dollars that come into the group. I agree with the chairman that when these other funds being used, again, you're just trying to keep the ship afloat. But I think it's important for us to know that when things start getting moved around, because if I may finish with this, and I was going to ask that as you talk about travel, going out to do certifications and so forth, that I know that's part of what the money they pay for, but if you have an institution that is causing you to go out there more often, I for one would support legislation that would allow you to charge them for that extra checking so that you didn't distribute those costs across good players, if you will. If there was somebody that was causing you to have to come back more often than not, you could charge them for that fee, and the people that were doing it right, they wouldn't have to pay that. So, again, that may not be necessary either. I'm not trying to create something, but I think you want to have your institutions that are doing right by the folks that they're educating, not to have to pay fees for people that are not. Thank you.
Real quick, and again, we're just trying to understand some of this, and this has been helpful. I'll be honest with you. Your presentation today and what your commission does, quite frankly, is very important. I don't think I learn something every day, and I've been up here a number of years. But let me go back. So in fee-wise, you're bringing in how much a year?
Between 1.3 and 1.4 million over the last couple of years.
Okay. And then, but your fees went up how much this year?
Well, the only fees that have gone up while I've been there are the fees on Georgia Sarah to make the program self-sustaining and not have to use our AOB to fund the program. And there's 3-tier status.
And I'm not.
And I can't remember off the top of my head. It was like 250,
yeah.
500, and 750. I
tell
think.
you what, it may get you to get some of those, just to break down to see where the fees are, because again, when we talk about fees and services, we want to make sure that those that are paying for it, whether private institutions or whether it's our coming in our budget, with our university system or technical college, we should be making money there. shifting money around, okay?
Yeah.
So, but I appreciate it, and again, I learned something a little bit more about this commission today, and y'all play a pretty vital role because there's a lot of people out there who could get hooked into what they think is a path or an education path that, quite frankly, is it's bad. I mean, you're regulating it, making sure that those that are coming in are doing what they say they do.
Sure, and you know, and it's not all bad. I know people think about the bad because there are bad things come out that makes the news, but our schools do a good service too. You know, we saw where they cover on the map, and Commissioner Dozier mentioned earlier about how there's employers that just want, can they weld a bead?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our schools, we have a lot of several welding schools, and I was at one in Athens, that's where I'm from, that we just authorized back about 6 months ago, and that's what they were focusing on.
I'd be curious to do you have a breakdown of these institutions outside of our private colleges? Of course, I think you said those are exempt from.
Yeah, they're exempt. There are certain things that they
Yeah.
have to do statutorily. There are certain institutions that have to provide financials, and we have to.
These guys that are coming in, these educational institutions that are coming in that are private, more private in nature, that they're filling a niche. I'd be curious to see what the breakdown of those are. Could we talk offline and maybe get some information there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
I can tell you, not to belabor the point, but the welding school in my community in down Ackworth is doing a fantastic job. I mean, their level of focus, and that's not to in any way diminish the work that our technical colleges or other delivery systems have. They give kids accreditation and degree programs and things, but the level of focus for the well-run schools in your system are very impressive.
Okay.
And I would just say to that fact of what I saw in the school in Athens, basically what the person there told me is that he used to work at Athens Tech in the welding program. And he said at Athens Tech, you'll essentially graduate with a PhD in welding. When you get done with our program, which is 30, 60 days, I don't remember how long it was, you'll be able to lay a bead, and you'll be able to work at Caterpillar for $15 an hour within a couple months. And instead of going through 2 years of technical training and those things. And so I used to be an economics teacher. It was opportunity cost, and I think a lot of our the folks that are drawn to these programs, I can either go for 2 years and spend very little at a technical college system, which is great for some people, or I got a family and I got to feed them right now, and I can go start making money. So there's some good things.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. So I appreciate it.
Yeah,
learned something today.
All right, so
All right.
just a couple other items here, because I had one more item here, amended FY20 reduction of funds there for computer refresh, and so again, like Georgia Student Finance was talking about, reducing the amount of funds we have there so that all of our computers in our office, there's 10 full-time employees, we're supposed to all be replaced. We're going to get on a rotation now to try to save some of our funds there.
Okay. So you're just putting off buying,
essentially.
updating.
That's right.
All right.
And then lastly here, FY21, just very quickly, basically most of these are the same as that you'll see here. TRS changes one. There's one employee there, myself, TRS, and then the increase for the one individual that makes under $40,000 in our agency. But virtually everything else is the same as where we are.
Yeah. You got one employee, but it's $1,600.
That's the additional.
Yeah. Salary and benefits.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great example for people, if I may, to know that what the benefits that go along with, the cost of the benefits that go along with state.
About 62%.
About 62%. For every dollar paid to a state employee, it actually costs the state.
Yeah, they did it by proportion of state fund.
So that's our budget breakdown by object class and the changes that are going on there. So I'll take any final questions that you might have before I turn over the floor.
I think that's it. We appreciate it.
I
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Dr. Baxter.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Susanna Baxter, and I'm president of the Georgia Independent College Association. The 24 member institutions of the Georgia Independent College Association consider themselves partners with the state for the public good. I've given you, or Patrick has distributed, some handouts for you today. One is our fact book, this gold book. I see some of you already looking through it. You'll find in this information about our sector, in aggregate, as well as individual institutional information. This will answer a lot of questions. If you have, if you're more curious than what is, for more information, I'll be glad to provide that to you. I've also provided a district report to you that is specific to students from your district that attend a private institution or a GICA member specifically. So you'll be able to see what's their average college GPA look like, how many Zell, how many Hope, and how many Pell and different recipients, what top majors are, what the top schools for in our membership that students from your district are going to. So I encourage you to look at that. If you'd like another breakdown of it, I'll be glad to provide that to you. So the 24 not-for-profit private colleges are SAC-COC accredited. That's the regional accreditor for this area and is, quite frankly, the most rigorous regional accreditor in the country. Our institutions are throughout the state. You'll notice the blue stars represent the main campus. The gold dots represent satellite campuses. And what's not on this map, because it would be too difficult to show, are all the students that are taking online courses. So our many of our 24 institutions have online degree programs, and students from across the state participate in those. As a whole, $3.2 billion was paid out in the last fiscal year on salaries and wages for persons working at a Georgia Independent College Association. That's the equivalent of needing to host 30 Final Four in men's NCAA championships, and not nearly as maddening. We will, also the information to know about this is that economic impact is not limited to one region of the state. That is throughout the entire state. So you can see within our member institutions, you'll notice institutions that are religiously affiliated or historically black colleges and universities, research institutions, teaching institutions, again, all throughout the state. So let's look at some of the characteristics of the students that we serve. We serve over 72,000 students in the last academic year. The majority of those are undergraduate students. 35% of our undergraduate students receive the tuition equalization grant. I like to think of this in the other way. That means the majority of our students are what I like to refer to as 9-month tourists. They're coming in from out of state, and they're spending local dollars and helping boost economies across this state, and hopefully staying in state. If you look at the enrollment by race, the majority of our students identify as non-white. Of our first-time full-time students, 42% of them receive the Pell Need-Based Aid Scholarship that the federal government provides. And then last kind of summary of our students, you'll see 11% of our students are over the age of 25. We have a number of institutions, it probably won't surprise you, that have programs specifically geared toward the working adult. Then if we look at financial aid, if we, the way the federal government identifies it as first-time, full-time students, 61% of aid provided to our students comes from the institution. So those of you that get annual fund reminders for donations from your undergraduate, that's what it's going for. It's those undergraduate, it's at the scholarships that we provide. So total, this means $134 million was given in fiscal year 17, or academic year 17-18 to our students. On average, that's over $18,000 of institutional aid per first-time, full-time student. It's an impressive amount and actually represents an enormous amount of hard work on behalf of the campuses to raise that money year over year. As we turn to look at the piece of the pie for state aid, I want to remind you that Georgia tuition aid follows the student. So the student receives it, not the institution. If we look at taxpayer funds, and there's a lot to see on the screen, you have a handout of that. I think I provided that handout. I think I may have left it in my bag, Jet, right there. You have a handout of this that you can read more closely. But this tracks, as a taxpayer, what are we spending for students that attend the different segments? And if we just hone in on us four-year institutions, the state taxpayer pays almost $30,000 for that student to get out if they get out in 4 years. For a private college, it's only $3,800. And so the tuition equalization grant, we are incredibly grateful to you all and the governor for his support of that program, because it does make a difference in the lives of students. Now, if we look at graduating, we do that. We graduate students on time at a much higher percentage than our counterparts. Now, we're all stuck. Public and private and for-profit institutions are all stuck with a really lousy definition that the feds have for what it means to graduate on time. But if we use that definition, we're still so. These numbers are low. They're not as low in actuality. It's this bad definition, but we're all stuck with the same definition. So if we look at that, 49% of students that go to a GICA member institution graduate in 4 years, as opposed to, say, the for-profit sector, where only 3% of students graduate in that time period. We are serving across the state, communities and the state well. In particular, if we look here at the dual enrollment, we had over 9,600 students enrolled in 2019 from 140 counties at one of our institutions to participate in dual enrollment. From a partnership perspective, just to remind you, we voluntarily participate in the Georgia Award System. That's the statewide student longitudinal data system. A handful of our institutions also have paid to participate in Georgia Tracks. That's the statewide transfer portal. The cost for that is significant for entry, and that has been a barrier for many institutions. And then we also participate and have partnered. In fact, in 2019, ended a 3-year grant that we received from the federal government to work with the technical college system as well as the university system in the area of sexual assault and prevention. One of our statewide partnerships that we're most proud of is within the area of articulation agreements. We put, the Georgia Independent College Association put an articulation agreement together with technical college systems many years ago, and then updated that in 2018 to include over 80 courses. Now, why is an articulation agreement important? So articulation agreement is really fancy talk for if I go to institution A and I want to go to institution B, what courses that I've taken at A will be accepted at institution B? And you can see there's all sorts of efficiency reasons to know that answer. So you may go to a technical college, you aspire to go to Wesleyan. That student needs to know what she takes. She won't be asked to retake it, right? It'll count for something. And so we work to articulate that across the different sectors. So we have a sector-wide agreement with the technical college system, and then our institutions also have their own separate agreements that might delve more deeply into, say, a specific program, where ours is really looking at the 80 courses. And we continue to work with TCSG on this issue of articulation because it's really important, particularly with the growing dual enrollment program, that we understand how this will happen, how students will matriculate, and how these courses will articulate. Want to focus on meeting workforce needs. You've heard from my counterparts in the public system a focus on workforce needs, and we would concur with them that that's exactly what our institutions are doing, is trying to meet Georgia's workforce needs. So I just want to look at healthcare professions. If you look at our graduates, 20% of the students that graduated last year or in 2018 from a GIC institution were in healthcare professions. Not throwing any kind of shade at USG at saying 11%, they have more students than we have, so their 11% is higher numbers of students. But you can see the dedication that our institutions have to healthcare in particular in Georgia. And then let's delve even deeper into the nursing workforce. I'm proud that GICA member institutions have increased the number of RN completions by 82% in the last 5 years. This is a result of institutions ramping up their nursing programs and growing them, and as well as the investment to start a new nursing program. That saves the state money from having to create more nursing programs that you're paying for. I don't know how familiar you are with nursing programs, but they're incredibly expensive to get off the ground, and our institutions, in response to being asked by the area healthcare providers, have started those programs for their communities. Mr. Chairman, that's a quick highlight, and I want to be cognizant of your time, so I'll stop there, but I could brag on all of our institutions and the work that they're doing.
Dr. Baxter, I want to say thank you. I've enjoyed in the last couple of years as I've been in this position, getting to know you and quite frankly, understanding a lot better about what our private colleges do. You mentioned several things, and I want to make sure that as committee members and anyone that may be listening, the contribution that you make. We've discussed this a lot. You serve Georgia in a number of different ways that helps this state. It is private colleges for public good, from dual enrollment issues and in areas of this state where there would not be an opportunity for dual enrollment for students to, quite frankly, your health care. I know that, right off the bat, Emory, Mercer, who else?
Well, even let's look at Andrew College down in Cuthbert. Yeah. The local healthcare system there, the hospital is having to close floors because they don't have enough nurses. Andrew, in the spring of 2019, graduated 27 nurses. Brand new program, first graduating class. Imagine what they could do year over year. That's going to open floors back up in hospitals.
Yeah. And again, Morehouse, Mercer, Emory. Again, I really appreciate that the more you get to understand what's going on, how much these private colleges, your private colleges, are doing to make sure that they're addressing, Georgia's needs, especially in healthcare. That's a big issue this year, especially around areas of rural health, the rural health crisis. And so, and again, I go to Emory, so a lot of those folks that I see,
That's
the
right.
doctors or students that are coming in.
And if you're in the West Georgia health system, I think 45% of their nurses are LaGrange College graduates. So we are doing a lot in that space.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the partnership, because that's a great help to what we're trying to do from a bigger policy point of view with healthcare. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Chairman Selson.
Thanks, sir. Dr. Baxter, thanks for being with us today. I'm going to ask you a hard question.
Okay.
What, as a state legislator or as a engaged member of our community, can we do to dramatically reduce the bone-crushing cost of private higher education? I mean, I say the word bone-crushing because I think about the costs. I have constituents come to me all the time. They're very excited about many of your institutions, but the cost is just backbreaking. I mean, I think about I went to a private institution of higher ed outside of Georgia, but near Georgia, and in 1992 when I graduated, it was $15,000 a year, tuition, room, and board combined. The campus was just as impressive then as it is now. I've got a high school senior this year that was considering following his parents' alma mater. It's $64,000 a year, tuition, room, and board. And that is bone-crushing costs. And I don't say this as an indictment. I just say there is a big cultural. We have a huge issue in our culture, I would argue. People that are proponents of private higher education, that it is crippling. And as we wrestle with student loan debt, I talk to presidents of other institutions, private institutions of higher education, that wrestle with that. I've traveled to probably 12 states taking my kids to different institutions of private institutions of higher education around the nation, and it is bone crushing. The prospect for parents and students to get a private higher education. How can we address that culturally? Whether it's in this room as an appropriator, probably not, perhaps in some ways. How do we address that culturally?
So I would acknowledge that we do have a college cost problem across all sectors. There was a youth in my youth group. Golly, she's a senior now. 4 years ago, she got into Auburn. She got into UGA. She was dead set on going to a large public, and the cost at Auburn ended up annually being $29,000. The cost at UGA, she was a Pell student. Hope student, but not a Zell student. So the cost at UGA was $14,000 a year. She ended up going to Young Harris for $5,000 a year. So I think part of, so I'm not disagreeing with you have a college cost problem, but I think the private colleges have a perception problem that parents assume that the list price is what's actually paid. If you look at page 10 of the descriptives that I gave, you've got, this shows our debt. So we're the average debt burden, which is around $29,000 per student. And then you can see we're below the national average and just above the southern average for average debt. So part of our institutions out of necessity are always needing to cut and streamline and be efficient. From a cost, from a list price, you and I could have a long conversation about what's happening and federally what's happening to create that environment where the list price is so much higher than the actual price that a student's paying.
And that's what I appreciate. I mean, the $18,500 number you talk about, the average, institution-based grants that kids are getting, and that takes, because if you take the $3.2 billion payroll that you alluded to, and then you divide that by 72,000 kids, that's still $44,000 of payroll per institution, plus you have other fixed cost. You take the $18,000 out of that. I know the $18,000 is a big and a real number, and I'm thankful for that. I guess the concern I've got is where do the root causes start? I've had folks come to me and say that it's the facilities arms race, that the facilities that we build for our public institutions create a facility, a student experience disparity that private institutions have to respond to in the marketplace of students. When I was a freshman at said institution in Greenville, my freshman dorm experience was a 15 by 15 room with painted CMU block with VCT tile floors, and the bathroom was down the hall, and it was a great experience for me. It was a Club Med college experience, even in those Spartan environment. Are we creating a circumstance where, again, because of student fees that are driving dormitory experiences or capital spending that's creating classroom and experiences for kids in our public institutions, is that creating an impact on private schools that you've got to spend more and more of your dollars on capital to compete as opposed to scholarships for kids?
Well, we absolutely have to be competitive, and there are whole books written on the subject matter that you're talking about. So we can't, we're not going to pretend to solve it or put all the things on the table. I think my college experience was similar to yours, and it wasn't that much long after that I was in a dean of students at a college, and we had similar living arrangements where we're being pushed into thinking of individual bathrooms. And nowadays, hardly anybody walks down the hall to a bathroom. And I think we have a marketplace that's demanding something that looks and feels more like home did, as opposed when you and I went to school, it was a different expectation. So we can talk about it offline. What I can tell you is that what our average debt is, that clearly students are not paying the list price that they see, and we're working very hard to streamline our programs and be as efficient as we possibly can.
And Mr. Chairman, I won't take more time. I will challenge you with this. I know it's easy when you benchmark yourselves against other states that we're doing better than the states around us. We're doing better. I get that. I just want to challenge the base premise of even the sort of ballpark of spending for private higher education. I think our nation needs to radically change the overall cost structure of that. And I don't know how we would, I've got some ideas how we would lead as Georgia. Appreciate what your institutions do. It can't change overnight. I just want to express not just a personal sentiment, but a sentiment I get from a number of parents is the cost of private higher education is bone crushing. and there's a greater desire for private education now than it would have been even 40 years ago. And I think it's of the highest order. I'd be glad to be part of the solution. So.
Great. I would love to talk to you about that. We are under some federal rules under antitrust that we cannot have conversations about cost with one another. Not you and me, but institutions can't. And so I think that contributes to the problem, and we've been working federally to try to get a reprieve of that rule for a few years so that we could convene a group of presidents. I cannot bring my colleges into a room and say, let's talk about the problem of college cost. It would be an antitrust violation. So we've been working at the federal level, and welcome your input and insight at the state level.
Well, and I want to say we've gone a little long with the committee meeting, but Dr. Baxter, I want to say thank you. And again, following up with Chairman Setzler, while it's bone crushing, I think the data that's here may explain that it's a perception problem, like you said, versus reality. Patrick was telling me that average debt in a USG institution is about $27,000. So the private colleges are right there in line, but I would also tell you that on page 10, I think the telling number is that you guys are doing more with less because of you guys aren't getting the taxpayer dollars, if you will, that our public institutions are. So when you look at it from that perspective, from a state's perspective, you're a great bargain with what you put out and what you do. But I agree. I think there's more folks in the stigma, and there's probably some perception issues there that would want to, attend these private colleges. But I would tell you to come talk to you. It's probably not as bad as what you think. So.
Yeah.
With that, guys, we've gone a little long, and I know we've got some other meetings. I want to say thank you for all that have sat through the long hearing. Again, Dr. Baxter, thank you for what you do with the public on behalf of the private colleges here in Georgia and what they do. We'll continue with budget hearings and talk, and we'll let you know when we're going to set up a next meeting. All right, thank you.